Hello, hello, welcome to Leap Taken. This is Mika, and here at Leap Taken, I talk about all things witchy, craft related, law of attraction, manifesting, esoteric, and everything else in between. And today I want to talk about a subject um, that comes up often, and I think it's worth exploring. So let's talk about some hoodoo. I got my notes here because I want to make sure I stay on track, and I want to make kind of my message understood. I'm gonna just give a full disclaimer. I have practiced hoodoo. I have practiced. I've done hoodoo spells, hoodoo workings. I even took a class on hoodoo, a workshop. It was the 1 day workshop some years ago. And, I've also had opportunities to learn from other hoodoo practitioners. So I've had some experience over the years, not just like a one-time thing, that, like throughout my witchcraft practice, having the benefit of being able to actually work with people who are more advanced. I I can regularly speak with someone that I know who is has extensive history in practicing hoodoo. So this is my disclaimer. Now I'll just get into the video. I want to first talk about my path currently. I'm a cottage witch. And what that basically means is kind of think eclectic, but with a lot of focus on the home, hearth and home. Um, I'm very into making sure that the spirit of the home is alive and well, balanced, the energy is good, because I truly believe that if I feed the energy in the home, if I feed the house spirits, if they are nourished, fed, balanced, that they can benefit me as well when maybe I'm not so much. I think it's one of the reasons that when I want to balance myself, I tend to go inward, like I stay in the home. I stay in certain areas of my home because I feel safe, I feel protected, and I feel like it's, I don't know, there's some sort of symbiotic relationship that's happening with just the energy of the home with myself. However, on the flip side, when I'm, feeling, very high frequency, and I'm joyous, and I'm just like, sort of just like, you could just feel the energy bouncing off of me, my home is receptive to that energy as well. It's not always the negative or when I'm down or when things are bad. It's also, it's in either direction. I feel like my home kind of helps. It'll boost me even more. The more I do, which in my home I do most of my work, the more works I do here, my spells and all that sort of stuff, guess what? My home is picking up with that energy. So, anyway, yeah, so that's cottage witchery in a very short, sweet, wrap it up in a bow type of description. Um, Now, I do want to talk a little bit about my background. I became interested in hoodoo many years ago. I just kind of alluded to the fact that, hey, I took a workshop once. I went to a pagan festival and I took a workshop there. It was a 1 day thing, like I said. It wasn't like a long drawn out thing, but it was interesting, and it was more honestly folk magic, which more about that later. So my basically I started off wanting to really explore. At first I had to learn a difference. I'm gonna just start at the beginning. I didn't even understand voodoo versus hoodoo. Like, I didn't understand there was a difference. I thought they were interchangeably used, and I think a lot of people do. That is not the case. Voodoo is not hoodoo. Hoodoo is, for lack of better words, I mean, you can kind of, I'm just going to use this descriptor, kind of like a folk magic. There's no religious aspect tied to hoodoo, which is important. As I learned years ago, not just like a couple days ago, but years ago when I was looking into hoodoo and what it meant, I understood the history about it. I think a lot of us out here, us being practitioners or people who seekers, of understanding magic and working spells and all that sort of stuff, you have to not ignore the history. It doesn't mean, you can't grow from where things can't grow from where they started, but you should at least know where it started or have an idea. You don't have to know who, what city, state, and all this other, all the details, the dates, but just have a general idea of where something came from. So for me with hoodoo, my background is I started understanding it because kind of like I was getting spoon fed pieces of information over time. I believe my spirit guides, the universe, if you will, was leading me to the path that I'm on now. I had to, we all start somewhere. So I was investigating, I was studying, learning. I didn't, internet existed, but not in a way where I had access like that. Um, and it has anything to do with my age. It wasn't like it is now. And I didn't have a home computer, I only had a computer at work. So there was that. So I had to understand all these concepts via books or in person if you were lucky enough to have access to someone. But anyway, once I understood hoodoo in the way that it's basically something, hoodoo is not a religion, it's folk magic. It's definitely, nature based because people are using the things that commonly found in nature to achieve their goals. Um, whether it's protection, whether it's some sort of revenge spell, yes, prosperity, lots of protective work. So I was being called on the path I'm on now, and cottage witchery tends to have a lot to do with protective work, protection magic. So let's just say I was already being roped in with that. I was already kind of like attracted that way. So I went ahead and I started understanding it, studying it, and I realized, okay, so our my ancestors, and depending on who you are watching this, our ancestors, um, a lot of them, not everyone, but a lot of them would have employed the use of hoodoo work for protection and for all other, sorts of things, but a lot of protective work. So, okay, I understood that. And that honestly intrigued me more. So, years have gone by. I've always been studying and learning. I begin to understand the difference between African traditional religions, or ATR, as you see people say, or African traditional spirituality. Um, I thought hoodoo was that initially early on, and I realized it's not really. Again, hoodoo is not necessarily a religion because you don't have to call on anybody with hoodoo. Even honestly, ancestral, you can. A lot of people, it kind of goes hand in hand, but not necessarily. You can put some work on somebody and never work with any ancestor and still have a successful hoodoo spell. But anyway, that's another subject. Um, it's interesting to me understanding all those years of me learning and then relearning and then adding more information to my knowledge bank to see today, with all this information at our fingertips with the internet, that and in our hands on our phones, right? To see so many people who just want to only be known as a hoodoo conjurer, hoodoo worker, hoodoo spiritualist, as if to refer to anything else or do anything else is somehow very different. So basically, my background is I've been studying for some years. I've practiced over the years. And honestly, there's a lot to my magic that still is using hoodoo when I think about it. But remember how I alluded to folk magic and I said more about that later? I mean, let's just be honest. There's some overlap there. Um, there's some overlap there. So things that I'm doing intuitively, which is coming most likely from my ancestral line. But this is where I'm about to change the subject up a little bit. Ancestral line. I'm not just of African descent, mostly, but not all. And when we talk about ancestors and the people I come from, I think now I'm going to use myself as an example for the amount of the quarter, about 25, just under 25% non African that's in me, uh, in my DNA. I just wonder sometimes, I have those thoughts like everybody else, like, okay, well, did it come most likely through violence, through rape or something like that, through my people before me? and that there's obviously a very likelihood of that. And then, consensual situations as well. Um, the reality of it is yes, those are my ancestors, but their whole line are also my ancestors. So, the rapey dude that might have, you know, done something to one of my ancestors, to help propagate for me to be here. He's horrible and rapey, yes, forever will be so. I don't know if all his people were rapey and were rape supporters per se, or violent, enjoy violence. So I would like to believe that those who are on the ancestral realm helping me are not. And if they were, that might be the thing that cosmically sort of cleanses their plate, so to speak, is to protect and help me and people like me. This is just something, I didn't read this in a book. This is just something I'm kind of conceptualizing for myself, for it all to make sense in the same way. And my African line, that part of me, that bigger part of me, um, for those who have done wrong, those who did not necessarily protect like they should have, I believe that they also protect now, because they're also cleaning, kind of cleansing their plate as well, cosmically speaking, karmically speaking. And myself and others, in our line, they watch out for us. I do. I really believe that. So with all that in mind, I'm setting up here. Just because I am mostly of African descent, just because I am, does not mean because I am into the occult, I'm into the spiritual, that I have to only practice hoodoo. I have to only practice voodoo. I have to only become initiated in an ATR. And I bring this up because you watching this, who have someone of mostly African descent, you don't have to. You can. And it has nothing to do with me going to some other part of my DNA. I just brought all that up to let you know, a lot of us, we have a lot of different ethnicities running through us, in our DNA. We're not all 100% of one thing. So if you needed a reason, you could pick that. But what I'm really getting at is, you don't have to practice hoodoo. You don't have to refer to yourself as a conjurer. You don't have to go down that path. You can learn it. I told you, I just background history learning, practicing, seeking, over the years. And I'm a cottage witch in the end, who may use hoodoo in her practicing some hoodoo work. Okay? This also translates, again, I want to now go and switch gears, talking about the Yoruba-based traditions. For some of us, you may feel it's your birthright to practice. You sound like you're the perfect person to see about getting initiated and following that path. Also, not all of us feel that way. Not all of us have that feeling, regardless of your percentages of DNA of African. And it's perfectly fine that you don't want to go down that path. You are not identifying more with the Europeans, the whites, if you will, if you choose to not follow a Yoruba-based tradition. It's okay. It's okay. I feel like it's getting lost in translation right now through the YouTubers, between the people on Instagram, even especially TikTok, where there's this idea that there's this division that needs to be taking place. With that being said, I kind of feel like when I look at just ancient history, I look at all of this, I look at all this information, and it trickles down, because I'm going somewhere with this, it trickles down to this whole idea of, when people want to tell me, they're not comfortable with a white person learning hoodoo, or non-black, we'll say that, because it's not even just about white people, I'm finding. They're not comfortable with that. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, that's cool that you don't feel comfortable. You own your feelings. It is what it is. I also kind of feel like Well, one, there's two thoughts I have with that. If you don't feel comfortable with them learning, that's fine. Then don't teach them. But then you're not comfortable with them learning at all. That's another problem. Then I do wonder if you, as the person who is a non-black person, and you understand the cultural relevance, you understand a bit of the history of hoodoo. I do wonder, why do you want to practice this? I have questions, not from a judgment place, but like more curious. I mean, I'm looking at the black person still saying, why does this bother you so much? Because well, I already know, I've had these conversations, because they're taking stuff from us. And it's like, well, then, okay, first off, we're way past the point of being able to gatekeep this, because if people are making videos and they're talking about hoodoo and there's books about it, like it's out of the bag, like it's out there. Um, if you don't want to work with people, that's on you. Like, that's your issue. That's you. I just think it's bizarre that you, with all this information just being readily available, are somehow annoyed that they are wanting to know the information. And again, I still go back to, if you are a non-black person and you understand the history and the culture relevance, why do you want to? Why is this the thing? Why this? I mean, why not ancient Chinese culture, where it's very rich, and I mean, and it's old, it's ancient. A lot of their belief systems there. Why not Hinduism? Why not go down that road and get more into that? That's very old, by the way, as well. I'm just curious, why this youngish version? Because you do understand hoodoo basically is taking a sort of approach to African spirituality that could not be freely practiced, because these people were being kidnapped, held against their will, and forced to work. So they created this other version, hence hoodoo. Now I'm going to fast forward. Here we are today, and it's 2022. And for those of us who may be practicing and who only want to identify as someone who is a hoodoo practitioner, I do wonder, I just do, don't you think our ancestors would have wanted it to evolve? And I do see some look like they are evolving it, where they're using more pagan, more technically European-based works, traditions, and things like that, and they're infusing it with their hoodoo. So that's crossing cultures, for sure. But I do see, that happening. But I want to, and that's awesome. But I want to talk about the ones who believe they're more authentic, and they want to make sure that they're not a witch, they're a hoodoo practitioner. That's different. For them, I guess my question that I sometimes wonder about is, knowing you now, I'm talking to that person, or if you're familiar with someone like that, knowing the cultural relevance, understanding the history, assuming you do, that was something practiced out of duress, need, shame, violence. This thing where you have a people who can't just be their powerful selves out in the open. They had to do it undercover. They used the resources around them, and that's genius that they were able to do that. And we should revere them, and we should always have respect. Kind of like I always have respect for the part that the Christian church played in civil rights, where not many Black people could gather in certain places, but you could gather in church. I will always have respect for that. All the others, I will always have respect for that. I will always have respect for my ancestors and people, and their ingenuity of being able to still practice and still express their spirituality and know how to adapt to their environment, which herbs and roots and things to use. It's beautiful, actually, when you really think about it. But here you are in 2022, and you want to do the same thing. we're basically, we understand more, we know more, there's more knowledge that has been gained. So now I bring it back to those of you who really have put yourself in this hoodoo box. Why won't you evolve? Don't you think your ancestors would have wanted us to evolve? Why do you want to stay there? To me, it's almost like kind of Amish operate. No more, no less than this year. You only want to stay within a certain time frame, that level of technology, that was the best, that's it. That's what you look like to me with that. This is not a negative video. I wanted to make that point. My intention, I want to say, my intention is to give validation to those who have guilt or concern about not following the hoodoo path, the path of the ATRs, the African based traditional spiritualities, the voodoo for that matter, for those, the Yoruba based traditions. Don't feel guilty about that. I've come across in my time a number of Black folk who, quite frankly, it just didn't work for them. It didn't gel. It's okay to explore witchcraft. Full stop. It's okay to explore practicing magic. It's okay to explore casting circles, the Fae. Fun fact: there's the equivalent of Fae magic in African certain countries in Africa and certain cultures. They do recognize the same thing as Fae. So if you're grappling with that, everything being European, like get off of that. And then I want to actually say something for those of you who are concerned about going too much to the European side. Um, let's talk about ancient history and culture. Y'all remember those Romans? Remember that? Where did Romans get most of their culture from? The Greeks. Where did they get their culture from? Egyptian. Okay. So, where's Egypt? Also, you do realize Africa, because there's, think of the continent. You do understand that there's the part of Africa where there's the more lighter tone. If you notice that, like the Middle East and all this, they look a little different. And then you have the more deeper, rich, ebony, rich toned Africans, right? There's this idea, I think, that is just there because there's just lack of cultural knowledge, as if those people don't have ancient culture as well. You ever hear of something like, remember that big warrior Shaka Zulu and all of that other stuff? Like, just learn. Just learn. Like, just learn. Because I don't like to, some people get too caught up on Egyptian culture too, thinking that's all of Africa. That's not either. But anyway, moving on, because I'm about to go on a full tangent about African. One day, I might do a video about that. Anyway, it's okay to explore witchcraft. It's okay to immerse yourself in other cultures without guilt. It's perfectly fine to do that. And I hope that you consider doing that instead of sort of putting yourself in this box that you can only be this or study this because that's what your people did, and you don't want to align to these other people who have done horrible things to your people. And I can understand that. Trust me, I do understand that. However, remember my earlier example. If my lineage was disturbed, we'll say, my DNA because of violence against one of us, one of my ancestors, that person, like I said, that's a horrible person. And I would like to believe they karmically and cosmically would have to atone for that. Their whole line, the people that they're from, I believe that they also walk with me as well, though. And they know, and they protect me. They know me. They know my other offspring. They all know. So we're all connected in that way. That helps me. I don't know if that helps you to kind of think of it that way. That way, maybe you can kind of let your guard down and maybe, feel a little bit more comfortable understanding hedge witchery, which is basically a level of practice that I've seen other Black witches do anyway, but they didn't give it that name because the term witch sounds European and people get into that whole thing. And basically, instead of you thinking of it in a racial sense, you should probably think of it more in a sexism thing, because typically when the term witch is used, it's usually derogatory, historically speaking, and it was always with women. It was always an issue with women, as opposed to just necessarily a racial thing. So if you're going to get offended about that part, because that part actually is more consistent. And even today is still a bigger issue. If you want to really say somebody was evil or mean, you still hear people say, oh, she's such a witch. So there you go. She, never a he. So to conclude this, and I know I felt like I was a little all over the place, that's because I'm really trying to I want to do this video and I want to be plain with you, but I also know there's a good amount of people out there who are hoodoo practitioners and identify as such, conjurers and such, who hear what they want to hear. And it sounds like I'm taking away the legitimacy of what they're doing. It sounds like I'm being negative in some fashion, and that is not at all what I'm doing. I'm not saying that one thing is better than the other. I guess I'm just really challenging and asking questions, right? Why do you, okay, knowing what we know now, and I'm just recapping here, knowing historically and like I said, cultural relevance of hoodoo and all that sort of stuff, right? We know, and if you don't know, learn, but hopefully you do have some semblance. Why are you wanting to pigeonhole yourself? Why do you want to stay in a box? Why do you want to stay in this space of our people who were forced to practice that way? It was forced. These people were under duress. This is why they practice that way. But then again, this goes into a larger question of, why are you still using the Bible, knowing what we know, knowing history, knowing the cultural relevance? If you get on my comments, and you start talking about some Ethiopian in the first Bible, I'm going to ask you to just save your keystrokes. Don't do that to me. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to the rest of us, because I'm not going to pay attention and I'm going to ignore it. Not because I'm trying to be ignorant or I'm, again, invalidating you, but again, if you just would study just a little bit of history, you would understand. Do you know how many other things predate that? Do you know how many cultures predate the writings there? Do you know what we've learned since then? So don't save the keystrokes. Don't do that, and do not come at me with no internet research. I mean, the internet is great. Again, we share knowledge. That's awesome. But I also, unless you're giving me some research based on, I don't know, some sort of symposium or some sort of interview with the accredited author of any race, I don't care. That's not the point. Who has published works with resources that are cited and verifiable information to back, research to back up the point, then no, I'm not interested if you come to me about some Bible stuff. But my point is, I had to make that tangent disclaimer because that exists in the world. Knowing what we know, if it comforts you and makes you feel great, awesome, that's wonderful for you. But knowing what we know, why are you still using it? Again, I told you, it's a larger issue. These people practice, our people, they practice it this way because that was the only way they could. Do you realize you can practice in the open now? Mostly. I'm over here talking about it in the internet. I'm loud and out about my witchcraft. So I'm just reminding you, you don't have to practice this way. You don't have to approach it that way anymore. Evolve, expand. You can keep your roots there, but expand. That's not being offensive. That's not pooing on the relevance of hoodoo and what it's done to our culture. In the same way, me no longer being Christian doesn't take away the benefits that Christian churches did for the civil rights movement. It doesn't take away from that at all. You see my point? Just expand. And I'm going to just leave this video here because I don't, I wanted to get my point across, but more importantly, I want you to watch this and kind of walk away just kind of thinking about it. whoever you are, whatever ethnicity, can't talk, ethnicity you're coming from, culturally speaking, just to kind of just stop and think about it. Why do you make the choices you made to study a certain path? Why did you? And some of us are still on a journey, so you might just be going through this because it makes sense to you right now, and that's perfectly fine. But maybe start to question, especially if you're doing something because you feel you're supposed to be doing it because of a cultural reason or an ethnicity, race reason. You're supposed to go this way because of that. I've opened myself to the realm, to so many different paths and so many ideas with just understanding. Doesn't mean I apply it all, but I open myself up to it. I don't want to put myself in a box. For the longest, I called myself an eclectic witch. That's why I'm not shutting myself off from different cultures and ideas, because it's almost impossible at this point. We're in a time, I mean, I could fly someplace in a matter of hours that, my ancestors would never dream of being able to get to these places, because it would take an indefinite, in their mind, an indefinite amount of time to get there, because the means of travel just wasn't developed yet. But travel has evolved. So I could be at the other side of the world in a day. You know what I mean? All I'm saying is, since I can, which means I can immerse myself in their culture, I can go live there, I can study and learn and adopt their philosophies. I can become that on some level, let's just be honest, and still have reverence and appreciate my own culture. Isn't that interesting? So I can do all these things now. So it's a big world. We have access now. Expand. That's all I got. And I'm going to stop it here. I am Mika. This is Leap Taken. Please don't forget, like, subscribe, share. And as always, thank you so much again for watching. Bye-bye.